Hello, John, and
Hello, Ludwig.
thank you for accepting my invitation. I will try to do a little presentation of your background and excuse me in advance if there's some mistakes. So you write and talk about the wonders of being alive, and you explore the ever-changing, ever-present reality of the here and now, and you show the people who listen to you that the idea of a separate self and an independent world is an illusion. And you notably draw from Advaita and Buddhism, but you're not tied to one tradition. And you wrote a lot of books. And I will ask my first question, which is a very basic one. Could you tell us a little bit of your journey in non-duality or spirituality, and maybe some elements of your masters or spiritual influences?
Uh-huh. Okay. Um, I was drawn to religion as a child. I wasn't raised in a religion, but and I was particularly attracted to Buddhism. I read books on religion. And then college, I read Alan Watts and Aldous Huxley, and I took a class on Vedanta and Zen, and I there was a little Zen sitting group, and I sat with them occasionally, which was my introduction to meditation. And that was in the 60s. And and then after college, I took a detour into very heavy drinking and drug use and nearly died. Sobered up at the age of 25. And after that, I got into politics. I was in various different political movements, the women's movement, the radical left, the disability rights movement, the LGBTQ movement, just a variety of different movements, the anti-imperialist movement. And and when I left the political world, I started going to the Zen Center in San Francisco, and then I lived at the Zen Center in Berkeley for a while. And then I worked for a while with Joko Beck, who was Charlotte Joko Beck, who um, was coming up to, I lived in the Bay Area at that time in California, and she was coming up there for retreats sometimes. And I continued to work with her until her death many years later. But then I also met Tony Packer, who became my
Mm.
main teacher. She was also coming out to California to do retreats, which is where I sat with her for the first time. And I was just very taken by her. So I almost immediately ended up on staff at her retreat center in northwestern New York, Springwater Center. And we remained very close until her death. And at Springwater, I encountered the book I Am That by Nisargadatta. And somebody told me about Jean Klein. And
Mm.
um, so when I was back in Berkeley, Jean Klein was there at one point, and I went to see him. And I ended up doing a number of retreats with Jean in the years before his death, and was very taken with him. And I love Nisargadatta. I mean, I my first copy of that book disintegrated. I read it so many times, and so I'm on my second copy, which is almost disintegrated. And let's see. And I also, um, sat with lots of different satsang teachers that were in the Bay Area at that
Mm.
time, like Gangaji and Francis Lucille. And um, I met Rupert Spira on a Francis Lucille retreat. This was long before he was teaching,
Mm.
and we were just both on the same retreat. And meanwhile, when I left Springwater, I had started holding group meetings and meeting with people individually. And so I was doing that, and I had written my first book while I was still at Springwater. And then I continued writing books. And and then I spent some time with some of what I call the radical non-dualists, like Tony Parsons and people like that. And uh, so and meanwhile, I also continued to work with various Zen teachers. I've done a number of retreats with Steve Hagen, a Zen teacher
Mm.
in Minnesota, and with John Tarrant, and of course Joko Beck, and who am I forgetting? Um, Undoubtedly somebody. Um, yes, the memory ain't what it used to be.
Oh, that's not a problem.
But
But
but let's see.
yes.
Yeah, so I think Steve Hagen had was very important, as
Mm.
was Anam Thupten
Oh.
Rinpoche, a Tibetan. I did a number of retreats with Anam Thupten, who I love. He's just wonderful. And then in the last years of his life, I went to some Zoom meetings with Peter Brown,
Mm.
whom I really liked. And then I have friends who are like John Aston and Daryl Bailey are personal friends, and so I've also had a lot of conversations with them and read their books and everything. Oh, Sailor Bob Adamson,
Mm.
I had a strong connection with him, and he I met him in person in Chicago, and so I've been around like to a
Mm.
lot of different. I've explored a lot of different. Tony Packer was a former Zen teacher who had left the tradition behind to work in a more open way. She was influenced a lot by Krishnamurti.
Okay.
Um,
Mm.
and so yeah, I was those were the influences that the people that I was with. I think I've
Mm.
probably remembered most of them. If not, undoubtedly
That's
I might have forgotten somebody, but
it's quite a wide range of the we can say maybe the non-dual world. And I've got a question for this non-dual world. Uh, can you? It's very basic one. I'm sorry for that, but can you explain us what is uh, your definition of non-duality?
oh, okay. And
Yes.
of course, seem to mean many different things by that word. Um, and all of the traditions that I've had some involvement with
Mm.
um, would consider themselves non-dual, and yet they're all quite different. Um, so I guess I would say it's the perspective that everything is one whole happening that cannot be divided up or pulled apart, even though it appears in infinitely diverse ways. And um, it's also the perspective that um, nothing has the solid, substantial, persisting, observer independent reality that we kind of think it does.
Mm.
That everything that appears is impermanent and disappearing really instantly, and or changing, however you want to say it, and that the self that we think is at the center of this body,
Mm.
kind of steering the ship, as it were, um, is really just um, a kind of mirage made up by thoughts, bodily sensations, memories, mental images, and so on, but that you can't really find this little me
Mm.
who who seems to be making my choices, making my decisions, experiencing my experiences, and living my life. And if we pay attention to what we are absolutely certain of and cannot possibly deny or doubt, it would have to be just this sense of being here, being present, being aware, and this present experiencing.
Mm.
anything we think about that after the fact can be doubted or
Mm,
questioned. But we can't question just the being here. And and when just that basic sense of being or aware presence doesn't really, it isn't encapsulated inside a body. And actually, if we explore the body, it's not the solid thing that we think it is. It's actually moving and changing and vibrating, and as a sensory experience, it's not
mm.
solid. So that, I guess, that would be sort of my perspective on non-duality.
And uh, what does it change to see this non-duality in one's experience?
Yeah. Uh, well, in my experience, it certainly doesn't mean that you thereafter live a life of total bliss um, and absence of any problems. Uh, but it, I think um, it helps to take things less seriously in a way, and to see how, um, when you see how everything goes together, how it's one whole happening, and that it doesn't have this sort of solid, substantial nature that we think it does, um, we can hold it more loosely. And as we question, as we realize that everything we think is actually wrong, nothing we think is entirely true, because thought cannot capture this living moment. So when we see that, it's like we can hold our opinions more lightly, which isn't to say that sometimes we do get very attached to them, but we begin to see the ways that we're identifying with our opinions, and the ways we're identifying with certain things, and um, so it tends to make relationships easier. And um, I don't know if you're familiar with the famous old Chinese farmer story.
It depends. It depends what's the story because there's a lot of
Oh,
story.
different ones. There may be
Yes.
different versions. I think it's originally an old Taoist story. I don't know, but the story, just briefly, is that there's an old Chinese farmer, and one day his favorite horse runs away, his only horse, I guess it is, and all the neighbors say, "Oh, what a terrible loss!" And he says, "Well, maybe." And then the next day, the wild horse, his horse comes back leading with it a whole bunch of wild horses. So now he has all these horses, and the neighbors come by and say, "Oh, what wonderful good fortune!" And he says, "Well, maybe." And then the next day, his son, which is his only son and the person who actually runs the farm now that the old farmer is old, his son is trying to ride one of the wild horses, and he falls and breaks his leg. And the neighbors come over and say, "Oh, what terrible bad fortune." And the farmer says, "Well, maybe." And then the next day, the army comes through, and they're conscripting all the young men to go fight a war in which they're all going to die. And then they don't take the farmer's son because he has a broken leg. So all the neighbors come over and say, "What wonderful good fortune." And the old farmer says, "Well, maybe." And it's a beautiful story that illustrates how everything is this one inseparable whole, and that what looks like good fortune can turn into bad fortune, and vice versa. And so it gives you a different perspective on the things that feel or seem like bad fortune, um, because you begin to see it from from the perspective of wholeness more and more. And
Yeah.
so I think it just makes life easier, and uh, in many ways, and more fun. Although that again doesn't mean, I mean, I can still get upset and have, you know, become defensive over some opinion that I'm arguing for, and so it doesn't. I think to me, it's just a never-ending, ongoing, moment to moment waking up. I don't really go with the idea of you have some big awakening and then you're awake, because I don't
Also.
even know who is the you who is always awake, And, what human being never has
Mm,
um, a moment of delusion? I haven't met any personally.
yeah, I understand, and it's really really clear. And but what's the because it seems like a good idea to taste this non-duality, but how can we do that?
Uh, well, um, in one sense, we're always tasting it, because it is what is. It is this whole happening, which includes everything, even our deluded thoughts, even our moments of upset, even the worst things that happen. It's everything. So, in a way, well, in a very real way,
Mm,
we can't really experience anything else. We're never not this non-dual whole. Um, but we can certainly think that we're not. We can think
mm,
and feel that we are separate, and that and the world that seems to be sort of out there as a solid persisting thing, it's
mm,
a very convincing illusion. I mean, it certainly looks that way if you don't look too closely. And so, I for me, the it just is a process um, of exploring,
mm,
really. You're like exploring the nature of our present experience just to see, well, is it really the way I think it is? This exploration is experiential more than it's not really so much about thinking about all this as like really looking to see, can I find this me who seems to be making my decisions? Or watching to see how a choice or a decision unfolds and see is there really a me in control of this?
mm,
And just watching, just noticing that when I actually like if I actually just close my eyes and sense the body, it's not a solid thing anymore. It's vibrations and tinglings, and it doesn't really even have a shape. It's, you
mm,
know, and I can't actually find a place where what I think of as inside turns into what I think of as outside. If I look for that boundary experientially with, do we find it? I don't find it,
mm,
so, and then also just really noticing how the thinking mind works, how these habitual thought patterns that come up, and how we get identified with our opinions and our ideas, and can feel as if our very life is being threatened if someone disagrees with us and that kind of thing. And so it's really just about seeing all this and exploring it. And there are many, to me, spending time sitting in silence is very helpful, and silent retreats have been very helpful. But I don't have the idea that that's what everyone needs to do, because I feel that everyone is unique, and everyone
mm,
has a unique journey. And so people seem to come to this in all kinds of different ways.
mm,
So I don't think there's any one method or formula that there are many there are many things on offer, and some of them will resonate with one person and not with another. And I think we kind of naturally find
mm.
what works for us and what resonates with us. And
So
yeah.
there's some kind of practice or some kind of looking, some kind of investigation. One has to do something, maybe.
Well, maybe not. I mean, some people, like Eckhart Tolle, for example, apparently
Mm,
wasn't doing anything of that sort and was just very depressed, and then had this really kind of sounds like a very major awakening. Um, uh, and so Ramana Maharshi, I mean, he did sort of was kind of doing an investigation of his own
mm,
about death when he had some sort of awakening. And then, you know, so I guess um, maybe not everyone does have to go through some sort of process of practice and things, but certainly I've really done a lot of that kind of thing. Practice. I don't even really use the word practice all that much just because it sounds more methodical than
Mm-mm.
but, I've done a lot of silent retreats and every day I sit in silence um, and, uh, and I've done other things too, like the work of Byron Katie. She's another person
Mm.
I once saw in person, twice saw in person and did the work with her. And I think that's, very helpful little method that she has. And so, yeah, and I think being with teachers is very helpful if they're good teachers. Well, even the bad ones, quote unquote, can be
Yes.
helpful in their own way, just like the old Chinese farmer story would show. Um, I mean, I think I've been very lucky because I've been with some really extraordinarily wonderful teachers,
Mm.
um, and everybody's path is different. So some people stay with one teacher and one practice, one system, one tradition. Other people like me go in all over the place, taking in all kinds of different things. And I
I
was
know.
thinking recently of my first Zen teacher, Mel Weitzman. At the time, I was going back and forth between the Zen Center and Tony Packer's place, and and he was always talking about the importance of settling. And I interpreted that in my mind to mean that, there was something wrong with what I was doing, going back and forth, that I should be settling in one
Mm.
place. And so one morning I went in to see him on Dokusan, a meeting between a teacher and student, and I was leaving for Springwater. And I asked him, I said, "What is settling?" And he kind of paused for a long moment, and then he said, "Settling is waking up moment to moment,"
Mm.
which is so beautiful. Um, and that really is what it boils down to. Or we could say it differently, realizing that we are awake in this one bottomless moment.
Yeah, it seems like very simple, but not easy to do for some people. And you talked about the radical approach of non-duality with Tony Parsons, for example. And maybe it's not really well understood where how uh, it, its approach works, or because it seems like very paradoxical and very uh, irritating for some people. And how
Yeah,
do you see this approach, which can be very mysterious for someone,
yeah.
some people?
I think my favorite people that I would sort of put in that radical category are Daryl Bailey and John Aston and
Mm.
maybe Peter Brown. I mean, Tony Parsons had a big impact on me at one time when it was early, the early 2000s, I think, when I did a retreat with him. And he had a big impact on me because it kind of freed me up from all the ideas that I kind of had about you've got to be silent
Mm.
and it was very transformative to me. Um, um, but I see a lot of people, who get kind of confused by it also. And and sort of looking for some sort of big breakthrough that
Mhm.
he seems to have had. And that's why I think I resonate more with Daryl Bailey and John Aston and Peter Peter Brown maybe because they approach it a little differently and they don't sort of hold out that big awakening in the future thing, which I think is a really misleading carrot.
Mm.
Um, so um, yeah, I think that radical approach can be, the danger in it is that it can be taken on as just kind of a mental idea or a new belief system. And I do see sometimes people doing that. and getting into a sort of almost fundamentalist dogmatic place about it where, you know, if you use the first person pronoun, they like
Mhm.
immediately say, who are you talking about? And, you know, you can't even have a conversation with them. Um, so, but when it's really kind of grokked or, yeah, so if you really get it or see it or, you know, feel it, um, it can be extremely liberating because to me, it's in a way, I think I would say it's the most liberating message. You know, getting the really feeling that this is it, that everything is it, that you can't, there's no you separate from this
Mhm.
who could not have this or who needs to get this. Um, and that there's, you know, because of the spiritual path, we tend to go through these things like searching for some big experience, some final breakthrough, and or then maybe we have these kind of wonderful openings and then we feel like we've lost it. So we kind of have this story about there's me going back and forth between getting it and losing it. And so the radical message is like there's no you going back and forth. There's just different experiences and they're all it. They're all this. And this is one whole happening, like all the events in the Chinese farmer story,
Mhm.
you know, and it has its peaks and valleys and its ups and downs, and it's all included. And so it frees you from that sense that you're not okay, that something better and different and more exciting or whatever needs to
Mhm.
happen, you know, that you need to get rid of these various tendencies that you have that are obviously diluted and you know, unspiritual and you have to get something and you have to stay in some experiential state all the time
Mhm.
and you know, your mind has to be quiet or this or that or the other thing, you know, and it just takes that away.
Mhm.
And amazingly, it does lead to in a way a quieter, I mean, it or just because when you just accept, it's an acceptance. It's like an acceptance of everything as it is. And it's not even that you have to do the accepting because there's no you. It's just everything already is accepted. Obviously, it's here. You know, it is. And so it's just it's very, very freeing, I think, and very liberating. And again, you know, it has the potential to go in some tricky, like not such great directions if it's
Mhm.
misunderstood. Um, but
It
but I
seems
think if
like
you
a little bit like the radical Dzogchen, which
uh,
is it's, the pinnacle of the Dzogchen teaching. There's the radical one, where there's simply the pointing out instruction, and then there's the opening, and you just have to remember that this is it. And but they say in the teachings that for some people, it's perfect, but for the majority of people, you have to follow maybe a more uh, practical path to
yeah.
come to this realization. They say purification, but it's not really like that. But it seems like there's a maybe a similitude. I don't know the word, but it's like yeah, it's alike. It's the same thing, maybe.
Yeah, I think there are I have to say I'm not that familiar with all of radical Tibetan, you know,
Mm.
Dzogchen and I've my experience. I've read a little bit of Longchenpa
Oh yes,
and
I thought
yeah,
of Longchenpa.
and I've been on retreat with Anam Tupten, as I said, and you know, so I've dipped into it a little bit, but it's not like something that I'm really, really familiar with. So, um, is that your path? I mean, is that something that you're?
Yes, but I'm quite non-sectarian, so I like Advaita Vedanta a lot because I find it fascinating that there's so much path that points to not the same experience, but the same non-duality.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's some facets that differs, but it's it's still fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I think a lot of these various approaches kind of are focused on experiencing the sense that we are this boundless
Mm,
awareness in which everything is appearing. And once that's obvious, it's not like really something you have to get because it's always here. But once that's obvious, in a way, it never goes away in the
mm,
sense that at any moment you stop and check, it's obvious.
mm,
But it can seem to go away in the sense that, we can again kind of become encapsulated in the sense of being this separate little me caught up in our, whatever. So we can kind of lose touch with it, it seems,
mm,
but anyway, a lot of teachings seem to be very much focused on that, on experiencing that we are that boundless awareness in which everything appears.
mm,
And then what I've noticed is that there can then be a sort of subtle dualism where people get sort of caught up in, I am trying to identify as awareness and not as a person. And it kind of becomes this thing that the little
mm,
me, is trying to do all the time. And awareness kind of becomes a thing. And so and then I know that in Kashmir Shaivism, or however
mm.
you say, I'm not even sure I'm saying it right, but which I
That's
again know not that much about, but that seems to be where Francis Lucille and
mm,
Rupert, and they have some roots in that tradition. And I think anyway, so that seems to very much the tantric kind of approach where it's like you start from that sort of, I'm not this, not I'm, netty netty, I'm
mm,
not this, I'm not that, and I am this boundless aware presence. And then you go from that to seeing that everything is this awareness, that that's all there is. And that so there's a kind of, I think Rupert describes it as um, the path of negation, and then the path of love,
mm.
or whatever. Um, but and then people like Daryl Bailey and John Aston and Tony Parsons also, they don't even really talk about awareness. They talk about more just the sort of the wholeness of it all. It's more just pointing to not really dividing it up into awareness and the content of awareness, but just this whole happening. And so it's the kind, the problem is that the apparent problem is that words can never really capture this. So
Yes, that's
so
the
none of these words, all of these words have the potential to be misleading, and they all have the potential to kind of wake us up to something that we weren't seeing before. So um, and for me, all of those different things that I've kind of mentioned about discovering boundless awareness, and then everything is one whole, undivided happening, it's all been an important kind of realization. Um, and um,
there's everyday word application maybe of this realization. It's not only in the cushion or only in a retreat setting,
right.
and maybe there's um, maybe it's a realization that can help to deal maybe with the lives that we all have, and today, especially in this complex mess, or political, diplomatical, social, and climatic, and which is very rich and very complex world. And how non-duality can help in today's um, uh, mess is not a very uh, beautiful world, but I think it's a quite good one.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and definitely both Joe Back and Tony Parsons, pardon me, Joe Back and Tony Packer,
Mhm.
my main teacher, Tony Packer, both emphasized the importance of that meditation isn't just something you do while you're sitting on your cushion, it's your whole life. And so a lot of the practice, if you want to call it that, or the exploration had to do with um, being aware of what was going on in our everyday encounters, like with our partner or our job or the political scene or whatever we were um, engaged in, and just noticing how, how the movement kind of from just the spaciousness of just being here, just experiencing this moment as it is, and then the sense of sort of contracting down into this
Mhm.
little separate me and getting identified with my ideas and feeling, all the things we go through, feeling hurt and abandoned and misunderstood and put down and all that stuff. And even when it has some actual truth to it, those kind of experiences, why do they upset us so much?
Mhm.
Why do we react? And often we're just even imagining that somebody's putting us down, and they're not even doing that. But so really exploring all of that and just noticing how all of that works was a lot of what Joko Beck and Tony Packer were pointing to and encouraging. And that definitely, I mean, it can be unpleasant because you notice all kinds of things about yourself that are not very attractive that you didn't think you were doing because they go against your self-image. But you find, oh, I'm manipulative. I can be, oh, I can be really controlling. Oh, you start to see all these things. And so I think that's really helpful in terms of, and the mess in the world. Um, I think it's the old Chinese farmer story. I think is one of the best ways to look at it because, and also to realize that, I've in recent years really started trying to listen to different
Mhm.
perspectives on what's going on and not just stay in my own bubble. And that has really helped because I see that the event that one side is completely, oh my God,
Mhm.
over the other side is like, oh, this is great. This is so wonderful, and it's helped me to see that there are so many different ways of seeing the same thing, supposedly the same thing,
Mhm.
and that so I've noticed that I'm much less upset and freaked out over the things that are going on. I mean, not to say that I have no concerns at all, but um but I don't sit around, I'm not I went through it, I've been through times where I was just totally freaked out over,
Mhm.
who just got elected or oh my God, the world's going to blow up or this or that. And I don't seem to be there anymore. And so, and I think just having this whole non-dual perspective, it's so helpful because it's just sort of like you realize that, well, eventually the world will blow up, and
Mhm.
it's sort of like whatever this whole happening is, it's not going to end with the world ending,
Mhm.
or me ending. Um, and um, so it just it takes some of the pressure off, I think, and
Mhm.
some of the um, like we spend a lot of time often worrying about things that never even happen. Like
Mhm.
my favorite quote from Mark Twain. I've been through some horrible things in my life, and some of them actually happened.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
whatever the nightmare, there's always an end to it. And
Yeah.
when we realize that it's a dream, maybe there's less suffering, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I think also just getting older. I mean, speaking as someone who's getting older, um, you know, you have this longer perspective on
Mm.
history. And it's sort of you realize that there are these cycles and things go this way and that way. And a lot of the things that happen, you think, oh, we've been here before. And when you're young, you feel like, oh my God, there's all these problems. And then uh when you get older, it's sort of like, oh yeah, we've been here before. So it's again, I think that helps also just in sort of taking away some of the worry and
Mm.
needless worry, because it doesn't really help to worry.
Yes, but sometimes we
You
can't
can't help it.
help. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
but it seems like there's a natural wisdom with the age, and I heard some teachers say that when he got old, he didn't know what part was of his wisdom, what part was his old age, or what part was due to the spiritual practice.
yeah,
And it was
yeah,
very interesting.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's that because who knows where anything comes from
Mm,
really. But I also think that when we realize that there's no little me in here running our life in the way we think we are, that there is, and we really get that everything is this moment couldn't be any other way than
mm,
exactly how it is. I couldn't be doing anything different than I'm doing. You couldn't be doing. When you really get that, you realize that all the political leaders in the world and all the, you know, terrible criminals and all the people that, are doing things you don't like, etc., they also are expressions of this whole reality, and they also could not be doing anything different at the moment than exactly what they're doing. And when you really see that, it takes the sort of like, if you don't see that, then you're really caught up in they shouldn't be doing this, and
mm,
blame and all of that sort of thing. And um, so it can be, which you see playing out on the global stage in so many ways, where people are holding on to grudges for
mm,
generations, and wars and everything else. And um, um, so yeah, I think it can really be transformative to see that. You might
mm.
still disagree with what someone's doing, but you don't see them again as sort of the evil monster that you saw
Mm.
them as from that other perspective.
Yes, um, that's the beauty of the path because it's all inclusive, maybe. And um, are there common obstacles on this path that you have encountered on your spiritual journey or with the people you encountered? And what's the main big hole that everyone falls into in the spiritual path? Maybe it doesn't exist, but if there is
Uh,
one,
well, there's certainly a lot of, potential pitfalls. Someone, I can't remember who said this, said the obstacle is the path.
mm,
And I think I don't really see anything as a mistake. I mean, you can't really, from this larger non-dual
mm,
perspective, see anything as a mistake. Of course, there are relative mistakes, like if I back my car into a fence or something, But but even that, from this perspective, is just what had to happen at that moment. So the mistakes seem to be part of our path and part of how we learn and grow,
mm,
and and like the old Chinese farmer story, they can often be our greatest blessings. So, but there certainly are, well, for one thing, I mean, just the hypnotic power of the dream, the apparent reality, and the sense, the thought sense of being this little me,
mm,
uh, is well, it's very powerful. I mean, it's a paradox because in one sense, when you see through it in any given moment, it's like nothing.
mm,
It's not even there, it's just nothing. It has no weight, but it can obviously have this enormous kind of addictive, compulsive power.
mm,
So it's for most people, it's not easy. Um, that the unraveling of all that and the sort of falling away of all that or the dissolution of that is, I think, a lifelong, never-ending process.
mm,
And for everybody, it's different. For some people, it seems to be much smoother and much easier. And some people even have these sudden, like Eckhart Tolle
mm.
type things. And,
Yeah.
and, and other people, it's much slower and,
Yeah.
takes
It can be
time.
frightening for some people also to see maybe the crumbling of the certainties or the crumbling of your world.
Yeah.
It can be unsettling.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think, we have a deep desire for security and
Mm,
control, of course, which biologically, on one level, makes great sense. But, it doesn't really, we can't really, we ultimately we don't control
mm,
anything. And that can be scary from the point of view of the body mind. It's
mm,
like we're very vulnerable to illness, death, disability, age, and so um, there is a kind of biological, I don't, other animals don't seem to have the same kind of, they have that fear only in the moment when something's
mm,
really approaching them, like a tiger or something approaching you to kill you, they feel it. I think humans, because of our psychological, our ability to imagine the future and everything else, we can really worry about things that aren't even happening, like what if there's an earthquake, even though there is no earthquake right now, and that kind of thing,
yeah.
so, and then, it like we just keep wanting to get some kind of certainty, and that plays into the spiritual world too, where we want an answer, we want some kind of system that we know is true. We want to know what this is, like we want the answer, and to just kind of be here openly, not needing to know what this is, just
Yeah. The don't know
like
mind. Yeah.
it's very
Mm.
freeing, actually. I mean, to the little me, it sounds really scary. Like, what do you
Yes.
mean? Like,
What's
no,
next?
yeah,
What's next?
what do I hold on to?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
But it's really freeing just to see that you don't need an answer. We don't need to know everything. I mean, we just being here is,
Mm,
I mean, practically we need to know things like how to get to the grocery store, but that's not what we're talking about. We're
mm,
talking about, yeah, so um and that to me is just the most freeing is just to be, um, we don't really need anything more than just this.
mm. It's very zen in the approach because there's the two things that the beginner's mind every moment is fresh, is new, and there's a new you at every moment.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there's the don't know mind. There's this training in some centers where they say, don't know, don't
yeah,
know. It's very zen and very fresh. I like
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, because everything is new. And, we have this tendency to think, well, I know who you are. You're my friend of 30 years. Of course, I know who you are. But we don't.
Mm,
I mean, because, neither one of us is the same person we were when we started this conversation. And, and so, to see everything freshly is one of the things I loved about Tony Packer was that she just never sort of got into dispensing the same old answer over and over. I
mm,
mean, she just kind of, if you'd ask her a question, she literally would spend the next day really looking into it, not just giving you the answer that she'd already discovered or something, you know? So and that's just a beautiful quality to sort of just remain, to be open to seeing something new, not having the idea that I've figured all this out and I've arrived and
Mm. Maybe it's impossible to figure out. Uh, Maybe there's a lot of philosophical books, but there's no conclusion. So
yeah. Yeah, I
it's
mean, science keeps finding out more and more
yeah,
and things,
yeah,
disproving things, you know, so it's like, and I think we can't, you can't say, I mean, this just is,
mm,
it just is as it is, and anything you say about it, um, is not like the word water is not water, anything you say about it, the map is not the territory. Anything you say about it is inevitably going to fall short. So, um, yeah, and just to be alive as it in the happening itself, as the happening itself is quite wonderful.
yeah, that's wonderful.
And
Uh,
sometimes not wonderful. I mean, sometimes like if we're going through a rough patch
yeah,
and we're in physical pain or emotional pain or something, but even then this offers a whole different way of being with that, you know,
mm.
that I think is very helpful.
Uh, for my last question, if you could leave our viewers with one essential tip or message to recognize easily one's essential nature, what would that be? The tip or the message?
Like the old Zen master said, attention, 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 attention.
Mm,
Meaning just give open, wholehearted attention to what is. Spend less time trying to figure it out mentally by thinking about it and and just explore and enjoy the bare happening of life, really just and stay open, don't just be open and just be here, just hearing the sound of the rain or seeing all the wonderful shapes and colors and feeling this presence, this aliveness that we are and that everything is, and um, just to really open to it, tune into it, be it. You can't actually not be it. I mean, we are it. It's all there is. So it's really about just noticing or recognizing
mm,
instead of being complete. And notice how we get caught up in the thought realm of this isn't it, this is not okay, I have to get
mm,
somewhere. Just see those thoughts and see, wait a minute, is that true?
mm,
Who is this little me who has to get somewhere? And where would I go other than right here?
mm. That's really to the point. And I want to really thank you for this conversation because I follow your work and your teachings for many years now, and it's always to the point. It's bare bones, like the title of one of your book, and it's really like a bowl of fresh air. It's because in the traditions it can be a little bit heavy sometimes. There's some um, good things about it, but sometimes it's good to have the essence only. And I think that it's what you give us, and it's really precious. Thank you very much
Oh,
for
thank you.
this.
That's lovely to hear. And it's been really, really beautiful being with you. I've thoroughly
Yes.
enjoyed it.
And
Yes.
I'm sorry for my very bad English.
Oh,
Uh,
your
uh,
English is fine.
it's, my accent is all over the place, but
No, I love your
it's
accent. I love,
thank you. Thank you very much. And I will try to upload the video in the next week. I'm not
okay,
sure because I have a lot of other things, but I will mail you the link if
good.
you want to see it.
Yes, yes, I definitely, and I'll share it on my Substack and Facebook page and everything.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I will put the links of your Substack, which is very wonderful to read if one can read in English, but it's perfect. Thank you
Oh,
very
thank you.
much.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Take care. This has been lovely.
Bye.
Bye.